Welcome to my hardware tour of the PowerMac G4 MDD FW800 dual 1.42 GHz. I wanted to give a hardware tour at this stage in the game because I haven't started upgrading this Mac yet. This is still basically bog standard configuration that you'd get from Apple. Now there are some hard drive upgrades in this box, but it's nothing completely through the roof and off the wall. It's just a few basic upgrades, but everything is pretty much standard in this box, and I want to give you a tour of the MDD before I upgrade it for my PowerPC challenge. Please look out for the PowerPC challenge and PowerMac G4 MDD upgrade videos. They will be happening in May and June, like I mentioned in my update video. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a full tour of this machine just like I have for other Macs in the past, and I'm going to walk you through every little detail. So here we have the front of the MDD. You can see a handle here. This is a feature that lots of people overlook, but we can expect it from Apple desktops. It's incredibly handy. Coming down we have the internal speaker, or more like the built-in speaker. This is incredibly handy. All system audio comes through here when you have no speakers or headphones attached. Coming down you can see we have the mirror drive doors. This is the power button and it also acts as the power LED. And here we have a headphone jack. This is the only PowerMac G4 case design that includes a headphone jack. Coming down again you can see we have two 5.25 inch bays, and again this is the only PowerMac G4 case design that includes two optical drive bays. The others include one and then a 3.5 inch bay for a floppy drive or a zip drive. In the top one you can see I have a super drive in here, or you can tell that I have an optical drive, but you can't tell it's a super drive. It's a Pioneer DVR105 I believe, so it's a very nice super drive, very reliable. I like Pioneer drives a lot. In the bottom we have nothing. This is a blank drive bay cover. As you can hear, that's a bit of metal that you can pop out from the inside. Coming down then, you can see that we have a rather unique design feature. These sort of four holes. Now there are little mirrors in these holes, and I believe they are for ventilation. That's what everyone says they're for. But more ventilation comes in down the bottom here. There is a big open space with a grill here, and that grill faces the two lower hard drive bays in the MDD case. So a fan mod under there would actually be quite good if you could get some very small fans, because there is a grill there. Coming down then you have one of my favourite features of the G4 MDD and the G4 Quicksilver, and that is the foot. This is a lovely clear plastic foot in the exact same design as the handle. So that's the front of the case, everyone. Let's take a look at both sides. Here we have the left side of the G4 MDD. On your average ATX PC you'd expect to see the door here, but not in this case. This side is completely blank apart from four Allen key holes, I believe they're Allen key holes, for removing the side panel. And that's just the plastic outer side panel I believe. And you can see we have a lovely big Apple logo in the middle. Now this isn't a sticker or paint, this is actually in the plastic, and it feels very, very nice. At the top you can see the side of the handles, which you can also remove. This is very convenient for posting these Macs just in case the handles break in the post. And then the same at the bottom for the feet. Flipping around to the right side panel, you can see that this is a little bit more detailed. We have the legendary latch for the oven door design, and I'll be showing you what that does in a minute. I'm sure you all know, but this is a hardware tour, and like I said, I'll be going through everything. So apart from the latch, everything else on this side is exactly the same. So moving on to the back of the computer, you can see we have a handle here, just like the front. It looks pretty much identical, but this and the foot is one of the only similarities between the back and the front. The back is actually extremely feature rich on the PowerMac G4 MDD. So let's take a look at all the ports. Before we get to the ports, you can see we have this here. This is a lock. If you pull this, it stops people from being able to open the side case. This is very handy if these machines were used in offices, if they were used in schools or any other public place, and of course if you just don't want your brother or your sister or your parents to get into your Mac. You pull this, the door doesn't lock. The door doesn't open, sorry. You can put a padlock through here and nobody can steal your components. Coming down we have 1, 2, 3, 4 ventilated PCI slot covers, And then we have the graphics card. On this particular graphics card, we have an ADC connection. That is Apple desktop connection, or Apple display connector, depending on what you like to call it. Can't remember what the official name is. And then we have DVI. Now, DVI out on a Mac like this is absolutely fantastic. If you get lower end graphics cards, then you have ADC and VGA. However, the most common graphics card found in an MDD is the 9000 Pro, the Radeon 9000 Pro, and that indeed does have a DVI and ADC port. So taking a closer look at the ports on the graphics card, you can see that the ADC port is indeed a bizarre looking port. It's not like anything we've seen before, and that's because it carries three things to the display. It carries the display signal, display power, and USB for the built-in USB hubs on the older cinema displays. This is quite a good idea, but it's not something that I'm a particular fan of, because that means you have to buy a very, very expensive adapter for the older cinema displays to be able to use them with computers that don't have ADC ports. When the aluminium displays came out, they ditched the use of the ADC port. Working our way down, you can see we have a standard REC power connector. You do not need a proprietary power cable to run this Mac. You can use any kettle lead that you have lying around. You can see on the back we have tons of ventilation. This is very handy, but there are no fans behind here. In the upgrade process and the modding process, it is possible to add 2 fans or 1 fan behind the CPU heatsink. This is something that I may consider. Taking a look at the ports then, you can see we have 2 USB 1.1 ports. If you want to get 2.0 action with this Mac, you need a PCI card. You have 2 FireWire 400 ports, 1 FireWire 800 port, which can only be found on the FireWire 800 Macs. You have a Ethernet port, 56K dial-up port, audio in and out, their standard 3.5mm jacks, and an Apple speaker out. This was used for the Pro speakers. Last thing on the back, you can see we have a Kensington Lock and also your standard foot. Apple invented a fantastic way to get into your computer with the PowerMac G3 blue and white, and that particular idea carried on all the way through the PowerMac G3 blue and white, all the way up to all the G4s, including the early G4 case designs, followed by the Quicksilver and the MDD. With the G5 they changed their approach, but I will never ever forget the satisfaction of the oven door. Now that is how you open a case. Everything in the G4 MDD case is absolutely crammed. Apple couldn't have got any more into this form factor even if they tried. However, while they were doing so, they managed to squeeze a ton of drives into this case, and the G4 MDD can hold more hard drives and more optical drives than every other PowerMac in existence. This includes every model of the G5 and every model of the G4 and G3 previous to this case design. Starting with the motherboard then, you can see we have 4 full-length 64-bit PCI slots. They all have ventilated PCI covers. Now, PCI slots are an absolute godsend when you're upgrading your older Mac. This allows you to add technology to your Mac that it was never designed for. You can add SATA cards, USB 2.0 cards, and even cheaper alternatives to the Apple Airport card. Down here is where you'd plug in your Apple Airport Extreme card. This is the first PowerMac G4 to support Airport Extreme. The ones previous just supported the Airport Standard. Airport Extreme brought wireless B and G compatibility, whereas original Airport only works with wireless B. As you've probably noticed, this is my mammoth graphics card. This is one of the most powerful graphics cards available in the PowerMac G4 at the time of release. This is the NVIDIA GeForce 4 Titanium. This has 128 megs of VRAM, and it's an absolute beast if you're interested in running a completely original PowerMac. However, I do recommend an upgrade if you plan on using your PowerMac as your main machine, including things like videos, newer video formats, slightly larger video resolutions, and newer games. This is a fantastic card for back in its day, but it's about 10 years old now, and you can flash newer cards and a lot quicker cards to work in this tower. Next to the AGP slot, you can see we have 4 Dimm slots. I believe these are DDR PC 2700 DIMMs. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't remember off the top of my head. 184 pin. These are 512 megabytes each. This is giving me a total of 2 gigabytes, which is the maximum that this Mac can support. Next to the RAM, it's pretty hard to miss this gigantic copper heatsink. Even though this is the most powerful model of the MDD, you can get bigger heatsinks, but this is the most efficient when it comes to cooling because none of the other heatsinks are copper. This gets extremely hot, but it's good at cooling, and I tend to find that the 1.42 gigahertz, even though it's a higher clock than earlier MDDs that I've had, I tend to find that maybe because of this heatsink, it tends to stay a little bit cooler. Back here there is space for 2 very low profile 60mm fans, or possibly one 80mm fan, but I'd say 2 60mm fans for definite. I have seen people do this, and this is something that I'm considering for exhaust. Here you can see the main system fan. This is 120mm in size, and it's an extremely powerful fan. I believe it shifts about 130 CFM, maybe 138. It's definitely over 100, so it's a very powerful fan. You can't just replace it with any 120mm fan. Why would you want to replace it? Well, it can be a little loud, and a replacement can be a way of quieting down your case. But with this particular MDD model, it's a pretty quiet fan anyway in comparison to the noise that the original MDDs made. However, having said that, to get a little bit of less volume out of this Mac, I may be replacing this. I'm not too sure, but I may be. It's a good fan. I'm really happy with it, and it does its job well, of course, because it's the original. As you can see, it lines up very well with the processor heatsink when the case is closed, and adding those exhaust fans behind the processor heatsink would just help this fan out a little bit. It would shift the air through a lot more, and it's something that Apple could have done originally. This is the primary location for hard drives within the PowerMac G4 MDD. The hard drives in this location use the ATA6 standard, more commonly known as ATA100. This is the fastest IDE transfer rate within this box, so this is the best place to mount your system hard drive. The only downfall to mounting it here, in my opinion, is it's a lot closer to where the heat's being emitted from the CPU. The other hard drive location is a fantastic place to mount them. I think it's cooler, and hard drives that I have mounted there do run a few degrees cooler, but here is where you get faster transfer rates. Now in here at the moment, in the standard G4 bay, I have 2 3.5-inch 250GB Maxter hard drives. These are configured in RAID 0, and I have a total of 500GB of space in this box at the moment. It's working really well, but I do plan on upgrading to SATA drives when I upgrade this Mac. This is where you mount your optical drives. As I mentioned, I have an optical drive in the top, and the bottom one is empty. The optical drives mounted here use the EID standard, or more commonly known as ATA3. Like I said earlier, this is the only case that supports 2 optical drives out of all PowerMacs out there. Here is your mounting position for 2 additional hard drives. This is hard drive number 3 and hard drive number 4. Now I have none in here at the moment, and I don't even have a hard drive cage in here, but it uses the exact same hard drive enclosure as the other hard drive mounting position in the case. Apple provides 2 Molex connections for power, and they also provide another IDE cable, but I don't have it here. I don't have the cage, and I don't have the cable. I don't need the IDE cable because I'll be using SATA drives, but I will need to pick up another MDD cage. Now this particular section here, if you're using IDE drives, it uses the Ultra ATA 66 standard, so it's slower than the ATA interface over there. However, you're not going to notice too much difference, but if you are running a system drive, put it in the other location, and here is where you'll want your storage drives. Coming down, we have a little fan, I believe it's 60mm, and this lines up perfectly when the door is closed with these ventilation holes on the optical drive cage. One of the last things I want to mention is this little sucker here. This is your little battery, and if you're having problems with your clock or anything like that within OS X, this guy needs to be changed. It's likely that you'll need to change it because these machines on average now are anywhere from 11 to 9 years old. So this battery has had a long life, and they are very cheap to get on eBay. But bear in mind, if you do want to change your battery, sometimes, especially if you have this graphics card or another long graphics card, you will need to take it out. I almost forgot to mention the power supply. This is possibly one of the most important parts because without this you wouldn't be going anywhere. Now I have a 360 watt power supply, and even though you can get 400 watt power supplies for the MDD, a 360 watt is actually a better PSU to have because it's quieter. Now, it's not silent, it's not whisper quiet, but it is a lot quieter than the original PSUs that came in the wind tunnel models. So if your PSU is gone and you want to replace it, and you're not happy with changing the fans in your PSU, then I'd go for a 360 watt, because you won't miss the 40 watts of power and it'll be a lot quieter. You can get them made by Samsung and Akbel, and I think with these particular versions they're both as reliable as each other, but different people have different opinions about the reliability of both power supply manufacturers. As long as I have a 360 watt one or a 400 watt one with modified fans and it's quiet, I don't really care. This power supply has been solid as a rock. They're known to go in MDDs, but slightly more in the original than they are in this FireWire 800 model. So that's the power supply. So that is my PowerMac G4 MDD FireWire 800 model, dual 1.42 GHz. It's a lovely Mac and it's going to receive a ton of upgrading in June. So please keep your eyes peeled. It's going to be absolutely fantastic, really fun, and I'm going to do a lot to it.